USA, USA, USA. USA, USA, USA. Ice cream. USA, USA, USA.
TYT, I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we're here in the great, big, beautiful USA.
USA, USA, USA.
You know, I'm surprised that conservatives aren't offended by her delivery there. I mean, if you're going to chant USA, you really got to put some pizzazz into it, right? But Sarah Huckabee Sanders seems like she's not as proud of the USA as she should be. Who knows? Anyway, as always, just want to encourage you guys to like and share the stream if you're watching us live right now. It's a good way to get the TYT message out there, the progressive message out there. We've got a great show ahead for you today. As always, we do things a little differently on Wednesdays where I get to indulge in stories I actually really do care about, and we'll get no views in the first hour, but it's okay. It's okay. At least those who are in favor of the deep dives will get just that. We're gonna talk about child labor and how Republicans wanna roll back child labor laws. We're also going to discuss the latest in foreign investment in United States real estate, particularly housing that, ordinary Americans desperately need, but somehow we are allowing foreign nationals to buy that real estate and never live in it. So we'll talk about that as well. In the second hour, Ron DeSantis, what are you gonna do, guys? What are all the Republican voters gonna do about this growing civil war within the Republican Party? Ron DeSantis has responded to Donald Trump's accusations that Ron is a groomer. So we'll get to that in the second hour. John Iadarola will be joining me for that portion of the show. For now, though, let's discuss what I'd argue is one of the most important stories of the day, not getting enough attention if you ask me, and it has to do with child labor. Republican state lawmakers in Iowa have introduced a pretty reprehensible child labor bill that would legalize minors as young as 14 years old to work in jobs that include things like, no big deal, just a little bit of manual labor, stuff like mining, logging, animal slaughterhouses, those kinds of jobs, I mean, what could go wrong? It's not like the United States has a history, a brutal, dark history with child labor, which we'll get to in just a moment. But first, a few details about this legislation. Senate File 167, introduced by State Senator Jason Schultz, would expand job opportunities available to teens, including letting children as young as 14 work in freezers and meat coolers and loading and unloading light tools. under certain conditions. Now, there is a very real reason why Republican lawmakers in this state, in Iowa, are pushing for this. The tight labor market might have something to do with it. Employers not wanting to, pay the workplace compensation for anyone who might get injured. That's another part of this. It's just so gross how far companies, with the help of Republicans, with Republicans aiding and abetting them, how far they'll go just to get their hands on cheap labor, but more importantly, labor they can take advantage of. And that's what I see this as. Now, this is a proposal, it hasn't passed yet. We're gonna keep an eye on it, but what else do we know about it? The proposed law contains an entirely new section that would allow the Iowa Workforce Development and State Department of Education heads to make exceptions to any of the prohibited jobs for teens between the ages of 14 to 17 participating in work-based learning or a school or employer administered work-related program. So not only would these employers get away with paying these minors less for these incredibly dangerous jobs, but workman's comp, that wouldn't apply to teenagers who are harmed in the process of doing their jobs, right? So if they're working at a meatpacking plant and something goes awry and they're injured as a result, well, the way this bill is written would ensure that the companies would not have to deal with any lawsuit or liability. So before we get to those details, I do want to just give you a sense of what it was like when we allowed for child labor to be carried out in this country. Because luckily, labor unions fought hard to reverse that practice. And now you have Republican lawmakers clawing back to a time in America where this is what we experienced with children.
The kinds of jobs you would find children working in ranged from the mines, the factories, the cotton mills, to working out on the streets selling newspapers. Injuries, even deaths, were very common among children. The parents would often say that they needed the income that their children brought in, that was what allowed them to continue to survive. A number of parents were advocates for child labor, and their children thought that that was the way life was.
Well, luckily that changed. There are still companies today who break child labor rules and regulations, and they get fined for it, and then they do it again because the profits they make from taking advantage of vulnerable people outweighs the fines they end up paying. We should probably do something about that to, ensure that we're actually enforcing our laws against child labor. But nonetheless, as I mentioned earlier, the thing that makes this proposal particularly disgusting is that knowing that these jobs are dangerous, knowing that these jobs could get these kids hurt, Republicans wrote the proposal in a way to ensure that should they get hurt, the companies employing them wouldn't have to face any type of lawsuit or liability for it. It exempts businesses from civil liability if a minor is sickened, injured, or killed due to the company's negligence. So again, it takes workman's comp out of the equation entirely. The bill, in addition, would allow 16 and 17-year-olds with the written permission of a parent, legal custodian, or guardian to serve alcohol to people who are drinking it on the premises of a business. It is insane. And what should terrify you is that when Republicans say they want to do something, and when they have the backing, the financial backing, the political backing of big business, if they're persistent enough, more often than not, they get what they want. And we should be concerned about that because we do not have what this country had previously to fight back against child labor. And that is strong labor militancy, labor unions. All of that has been decimated considerably. So what did it look like when workers fought against child labor earlier in this country's history? Well, let's take a look.
Local authorities learned of the plant's practice of employing underage workers after a Guatemalan.
It was easy to find school-aged kids like Furman Owens, who started working in a South Carolina mill when he was only 8. He said he and others like him didn't even know their ABCs, and that they wanted to learn, but they couldn't because they worked all the time. Individual workers and social reformers in the 1800s and 1900s fought against child labor, dangerous working conditions, long hours, and bad wages, but they had little power until labor unions were formed. Striking was an effective bargaining tool, but going on strike was not just a parade. It was more like a rebellion, and the situation could be terrifying and dangerous. Local and national governments treated strikes as civil unrest and often dispatched armed troops to break them up. Workers were injured and many died as they clashed with police and National Guard.
Unions worked very hard to demand legislation that brought about an end to child labor in this country.
So the unions obviously had a major impact on various labor laws, including regulations pertaining to child labor. The thing that concerns me is union membership, I should say, has gone down significantly since then. In fact, I thought that there was more labor militancy in 2022, but I guess I would be mistaken because according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, union membership or the union membership rate was 10.1% in 2022, which was actually down from 10.3% in 2021. So unless you have an organized workforce, unless you have strong labor unions that are willing to fight back to protect workers' rights and to ensure that children are not being preyed upon by big business, you need to organize, you need to ensure that you have the backing, the support of a union should you want to strike, right? We don't have that now, and that is what concerns me the most. This is why you have Republicans constantly bad-mouthing unions. This is why big businesses want to squash any talk of their employees unionizing. It's because you actually have the ability to fight back against some of these more disgusting business practices, including employing children in incredibly unsafe jobs that require working with heavy machinery that could lead to them losing a limb, that could lead to them dying. And by the way, we were already in a bad situation even before this proposal because we've been consistently covering more and more stories involving child labor regulations being violated by various companies. They get a slap on the wrist, they pay the fine, and then they're likely to do it again. One of the more insane stories that came out this year had to do with Hyundai, which severed its ties with 2 plants in Alabama because of how they had been violating child labor laws. Let's take a look at that.
Local authorities learned of the plant's practice of employing underage workers after a Guatemalan migrant child went briefly missing in February. It was later discovered that the girl, who was 13 at the time, had been working at Smart along with her 12 and 15-year-old brothers. Reuters says the siblings were, quote, among a larger cohort of underage workers who found jobs at the Hyundai-owned supplier over the past few years, and cites interviews with a dozen former and current plant employees and labor recruiters. The report adds that the facility has a history of safety violations and amputation hazards.
Amputation hazards. So again, you have Alabama plants hiring immigrant minors to work in these plants. Luckily, Hyundai took a stance and severed ties with these 2 plants as a result of that. But the point here is companies are gonna focus on what they're supposed to focus on, maximizing profits. And they're willing to do that at any and all costs. There is no question of morality for them. This is not a discussion about whether or not a company is a good company or a bad company. It's a discussion about how the system is set up and what the motivating factors are. The motivating factors for big business is to provide a return on investment for their shareholders, maximize profits. That is what their responsibility is. And if they can claw away at any regulation that stands in their way, they will do it. And so if you think the federal government is gonna step in and protect you or your children or anyone in the workforce from the terrible behavior, the bad treatment coming from corporate executives or these various businesses, I think you'd be mistaken. Because even when we finally did accomplish the labor regulations that we desperately needed, it didn't just come out of nowhere. There wasn't a group of politicians who were self-motivated and wanted to do the right thing. No, you had an organized outside pressure campaign in the form of organized labor unions fighting back and making sure that these politicians bend to their will and get the regulations that they desperately needed and wanted. I think that we're far too comfortable with this ridiculous idea that all we need to do is vote, and then that's it. I mean, the politician campaigned on all the things I liked, so they'll take it from here, right? Except no, why would they? There are motivating factors within Congress as well, including the desperate need to get along with your fellow colleagues. Well, if we had an outside pressure campaign that was well organized, maybe some of these progressive politicians, for instance, would remember who elected them in the first place and who they're supposed to be working for. Definitely not for their colleagues, for their constituents. The problem is the constituents are not organized, and the outside pressure campaign that we so desperately need doesn't exist right now. All right, well, let's move on to some other news because, man, Democrats have been bad for a while, and here's a good example of it.
I don't like when American presidents pit US companies against people. I know what the president's trying to get at, but we need a fair tax system. But pharma was good to us during COVID. Big oil is important to us as we now find ourselves at a war, a war in Ukraine. So I think that us versus them thing is not necessarily the thing to do, but we need a fair tax code. Even you and I started talking about how we could agree on the Medicaid expansion by making work requirements.
Pharma was good to us during COVID? I'm gonna debunk that with actual facts in a minute. Well, before I do, who was that guy? Well, it's former Democratic Representative Harold Ford telling Americans that corporations are freaking awesome and that Joe Biden pitting Americans against big business is very, very naughty, so bad. So that was his response to Biden's State of the Union address last night. And the lies told are pretty incredible. Now, I should also note, Harold Ford, who's no longer in Congress, he served up until 2007, now has his own lobbying group of some sort. So he is a lobbyist himself. He loves government corruption. So when we talk about big business corrupting politicians, he finds that to be fine and dandy because he's a beneficiary of that. He loves it. Okay. He also provides cover for the bad behavior of pharmaceutical companies and big oil because they're likely his clients. But let's actually debunk what he said there, okay? He mentioned how pharma's been good to us during COVID. No, pharma was able to collect quite a bit of taxpayer money in what was referred to as Trump's Operation Warp Speed. So that was public money that was funneled to private pharmaceutical companies to speed up the development and the manufacturing of the vaccine. They didn't do it out of nowhere. In fact, when it comes to research and development, the National Institutes of Health happen to provide quite a bit of money, $30 billion a year to pharmaceutical companies so they can actually, do the research and development for new drugs. I mean, because God forbid they take the risk with their capital when it comes to the research and development. The US taxpayer has to pay $30 billion for research and development so we can later be price gouged by the same pharmaceutical companies. But Harold Ford tells you should like that. You should sit down and take it. I mean, it is pathetic. This is a Democrat. That's a Democrat, okay? I mean, it's remarkable. Now, what set him off? Why don't we go back to Joe Biden's State of the Union address just last night.
We pay for these investments in our future by finally making the wealthiest and biggest corporations begin to pay their fair share. I'm a capitalist, but pay your fair share. I think a lot of you at home agree with me and many people that you know. The tax system is not fair. It is not fair. The idea that in 2020, 55 of the largest corporations in America, the Fortune 500, made $40 billion in profits and paid zero in federal taxes? Zero? Folks, it's simply not fair. Corporations ought to do the right thing. That's why I propose we quadruple the tax on corporate stock buybacks and encourage long-term investments.
That that is what set off Harold Ford. Oh, God forbid, businesses pay their fair share in taxes. Now, remember, the corporate tax rate prior to Trump cutting it was 35%. When you consider all the corporate tax loopholes that went into effect, all the possible deductions that corporations could take advantage of, the effective tax rate for corporations was actually closer to 17% on average. And the Biden administration claimed that they were gonna reverse the Trump era tax cuts, but he didn't want the corporate tax rate to go up to 35%. He proposed that the corporate tax rate go up from 21%, which is what Trump did, to 28%, not 35%. So like the idea that Biden is some fire breather, some socialist fire breather, he's so tough on corporations, is laughable to say the least. He didn't even fight for that provision. At the end of the day, that provision failed. It was scrapped from any legislation, and really the corporate tax rate never went up to 28%. Okay, so the effective 21%, not effective, but the 21% corporate tax rate that was accomplished by Donald Trump remains, along with all the corporate deductions and loopholes that they can take advantage of. So their effective tax rate is even lower than that. That's what the reality of the situation is. But just based on the rhetoric we heard from Biden, Harold Ford got real salty, very upset. Why could that be? Why don't we take a look at what his political career looked like, including his fundraising efforts. He raised quite a bit of money. So he raised around $1 million in every election cycle except for 2006. So in 2006, for some reason, all of a sudden he saw this massive jump in contributions to his campaign. Now, he served until 2007, so I'm happy to say that that money apparently didn't work. But nonetheless, $14 million he had contributed to his campaign in 2006. Why don't we look at the top industries? Securities and investment. It's right at the top of the list, which is relevant because when Biden talks about corporations paying their fair share in taxes, what does that often lead to? Well, paying more in taxes means the federal government is gonna cut into your profits. Profits mean that the shareholders might not collect as much in, increase in share prices or through dividends. And so he's still working for the same people who funded his campaign. He's still looking out for them. God forbid they pay anywhere near percentage-wise what we pay in our taxes. That might eat away at their profits. That might have a negative effect on these poor shareholders. What are we gonna do? It's incredibly gross that we keep hearing the same ridiculous commentary coming from people, politicians, former politicians, who pretend to be on the side of ordinary Americans. By the way, let's go back to the point that he made about oil, which was also equally ridiculous. So oil companies are doing real well this year. Why don't we look at their profits? I should say last year. 2022, their profits were pretty gigantic. BP, for instance, $28 billion. This is not revenue, folks. This is profits. BP made $28 billion in profits in 2022. Chevron, $35.5 billion. Shell, $40 billion. ExxonMobil, $56 billion. You wanna know why? They took advantage of the Russian invasion into Ukraine to price gouge the hell out of us. They price gouged us like crazy. And what are they gonna do now? Well, they're going to further enrich themselves with, you guessed it, corporate stock buybacks. Let's talk about that. So BP plans on spending $2.75 billion on corporate stock buybacks. Shell, $4 billion. ExxonMobil, $35 billion. Oh man, ExxonMobil shareholders must be salivating over that number. Chevron, $75 billion. This is how the system works. And you have a former Democratic lawmaker not only loving this system, but going out of his way to go on Fox News to protect that system and speak out against Biden's rhetorical, like just his rhetoric, really. It's so offensive to hear Biden just posture about something that he's not gonna do or accomplish that he has to go on Fox News and speak out against him. I get it, man. It's tough. It's tough to earn an honest living in this country and survive, be able to pay your rent, be able to pay your mortgage, your car payment, whatever it is. But I could never be a bitch for corporations the way some of these corporate Democrats are. Just couldn't sleep at night. Something tells me that Ford has no problem though. We got to take a break. When we come back, foreign investment in US real estate, should it be banned? I think some of you already know how I feel about it, but it seems like some Democrats are against it. We'll tell you why when we return.
Ice cream. USA, USA, USA.
Welcome to our first social break of the day. Let's start with Mickey C, the silver-haired dragon, who says, when our tax money goes to big pharma for R&D, when that drug starts making a profit, a percentage should be paid back to us in increments until we're paid back. I mean, you know I agree with you on that wholeheartedly. But the reason why it doesn't happen is because politicians don't feel the necessary pressure to make that happen. It's because the money they get from our corporate overlords outweigh any voice that we might have as individuals, which is why I think the only real solution to all of the issues that we're facing right now is to build a broad coalition of ordinary Americans who demand more. Labor unions did that. It was a proven success in this country's history. I really think that's the only way to move forward at this point. Kabuki Dragon says, Anna, it's not an exaggeration to say that you and the TYT family are the only thing keeping me sane in these dystopian times. Well, you and weed, but still, so much love and aloha for all that you do. Thank you so much for that. Since you said aloha, I'm assuming you're in Hawaii, and I'm very, very jealous. I wish I was back there right now. No good name ideas, Dragon says, I'm here for the deep dives, Anna. Whoop, whoop. Okay, well, you're getting them in the first hour, so I hope you are enjoying that. Let's move over to our Twitch subs. Baxter's Revenge says, it's okay, Anna, we love you and we love your stories. Thank you. Jax Drax, hard labor over having a childhood. Oh, how they care so much about the children. I know, exactly. I mean, the faux concern about children when it comes to drag shows is hilarious when, and by the way, it's actually such a perfect example, right? The distractions that the right wing constantly bait us with, when in the meantime, behind the scenes, this is what they're doing. They're proposing legislation that would legalize 14-year-olds working in mines and meat slaughterhouses, okay? Don't focus on what they want you to focus on because they're trying to distract you, okay? As soon as they start some new culture war narrative, mock them and immediately pivot, move on to what they actually want to do, which is rob you on behalf of their corporate donors. It happens all the time, over and over again. I think that's part of where a lot of my frustration is coming from with doing this job. It's just the lack of focus and how things keep devolving because of all the distractions, intentional distractions. And that's not to say that their war against the LGBTQ community should be ignored. No, it shouldn't be ignored, and we should absolutely fight back on that. But when they fearmonger, when they lie, mock them and immediately pivot to what they really want to accomplish, which again is to lessen any power workers have at the workplace, any power ordinary Americans have in this country. That is their goal. And they do it again on behalf of corporations who are seeking the highest profits. everyone, welcome back to the show. I'm just gonna read one quick super chat because I want to promote what is mentioned here. So Kelly says, congratulations, Anna, on having your audio clip featured in Bernie Sanders' new video, along with David Dole of Rational National Progressive Power. So I actually tweeted that video out for those of you who want to check it out. I loved it, not only because I was included in it, but because Bernie, unlike most other politicians, is so principled in his message and what he fights for. I mean, talk about never being distracted and just constantly being focused on what you want to accomplish on behalf of your constituents and the American people. He's incredible. So, we do criticize him here and there because we want to see him fight more. I get that that's not his style, but he is promoting and working hard toward the policies that we so desperately need in this country, including single-payer healthcare. All right, well, let's move on to some housing-related news.
This housing complex in Irvine, California is being built for Chinese buyers. Separate walk cooking rooms, no unlucky fours in the addresses, and multiple entrances for multi-generational living.
Now that video is actually from many years ago. However, for decades now, foreign investors have been buying up the limited housing supply we have here in the United States. As you all know, we're dealing with a very serious housing crisis. We absolutely need to build more housing. And because of the lack of inventory in terms of single family homes or properties that ordinary Americans can buy, it's actually leading to more demand in the rental market. That is driving up prices when it comes to rent. It has been a disaster. And so now we're hearing from some Republican lawmakers on a state and local level attempt to ban specifically Chinese nationals from buying up real estate in their states. Now, I'm gonna stop for a second and say I am against targeting one country, which is what we're seeing from these Republican proposals. But in general, I do think that we need regulations banning investment from foreign nationals into United States real estate, especially housing when we are dealing with a housing crisis. If you don't live here, if you're not gonna live in the house, you don't get to buy the house. And by the way, this isn't some crazy right-wing idea. They've passed similar laws in places like Canada, where their housing market was being negatively impacted by foreign nationals all over the world buying up single family homes. This is something that isn't even on Congress's radar, and it's concerning me. And since Republicans have a more targeted approach against Chinese nationals, for obvious reasons, right? They want to fearmonger about China and all of that. Democrats are responding the way that they typically respond. Oh, this is racist, this is hateful, we're not having a conversation about it. Okay, but we should have a conversation about whether it makes sense to allow for foreign investment into United States real estate in the middle of a housing crisis, in the middle of a situation where places like Los Angeles have 60,000 people living on the streets. We should have that conversation. But Democrats are not having that conversation. That is an issue. So let's talk about what some of these other states are doing and what Republicans are proposing. At least 11 states are considering some form of new legislation related to foreign ownership of farmland or real estate, according to the National Conference of State Legislators. Now, lawmakers have expressed concern over the security of the nation's food supply and worry that several land purchases were deliberately made near American military bases. I'm just gonna admit that is a little bit concerning, right? So we do unfortunately have an increasingly adversarial relationship with China. I probably would feel uncomfortable with allowing for a, Chinese national to buy farmland right next to a military base. Now, the United States Air Force weighed in on a Chinese company's purchase of a corn mill in North Dakota, not far from a base, declaring it a significant threat. So again, the motivations for Republicans are very different from what my motivations are. My motivation is we need to protect the limited housing supply we have for Americans and not allow foreign nationals who don't live here, don't want to live in those houses, to park their money in our real estate. And by the way, oftentimes when that money is used to buy US real estate, it's also meant to launder the money that they've made, right? So that's also a problem. But anyway, for Republicans, they're concerned about national security, allegedly. Okay. Now, a Chinese company also bought land near an Air Force in Del Rio, Texas. And so that's part of the reason why Texas Governor Greg Abbott, with the help of Republican lawmakers in his state, are pursuing legislation to ban Chinese nationals from purchasing real estate in their state. Now, there are, again, some issues with how the proposals are written, right? So some of the new and proposed laws go beyond targeting Chinese nationals to broadly take aim at ownership by all foreign governments, businesses, and here's where I have an issue, new immigrants. So if you're a new immigrant, you're here in the United States, you're gonna live here. I don't think you should be included in this conversation. My issue is with people buying up our limited housing supply just as an investment or as a way to launder their money, because that hurts us, US citizens who desperately need the housing. Other laws, like the one under consideration in Texas, do in fact single out countries seen as particular security threats, including Russia, Iran, and North Korea, in addition to China. Are North Koreans buying up US real estate? I like how they gratuitously included North Korea. I don't know, maybe they are, I'm just completely unaware of it. In Texas, Democratic leaders, though, said that the broad measure now before the legislature appeared to be prompted more by a rising anti-China political environment than any legitimate concern over espionage or foreign ownership of the food supply. Well, look into it and research it and see if there's actually a threat, because I think it would be a bad idea to just automatically dismiss what Republicans are worried about because you don't like Republicans, right? So if there's evidence to prove that these are unfounded concerns, then by all means, reject what Republican lawmakers are trying to do in the state of Texas or any other state where they have similar proposals. But they should do their due diligence and at least hear them out on that. Now, there are some other concerns, right? Such a bill would raise a host of constitutional issues because the measure does not distinguish between targeting people who are already here and those outside the United States. It raises serious due process and equal protection issues, and that's according to a law professor over at the University of Texas. And I think that is a legitimate critique. And so in response to an inquiry from the New York Times about that, one Texas state senator said, you know what, good point, we're gonna do better and make sure that we're more specific in how we write this legislation to ensure that there are no constitutional violations by the proposed legislation. Now in California, a bill to rein in foreign ownership of farmland passed both democratically controlled houses last year. The bill's sponsor, Senator Melissa Hurtado, a Democrat, said it was an effort to stop the purchases while trying to better understand the motivation behind them. But notice how it focuses on farmland. It does not focus on what I think it should focus on, which is housing. Now, the California bill, by the way, did make it through the state legislature, but it was then vetoed by Gavin Newsom. Curious. And I should note that Chinese investors are among the top foreign purchasers of residential real estate, along with Canadians, and that's according to the National Association of Realtors. I think in Oklahoma, they might have a better plan in place. In Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Constitution limits land ownership to US citizens. Those laws, unlike the proposal in Texas, do not single out citizens of particular countries. In Canada, a sweeping ban on foreign ownership of residential property went into effect this year, which sounds pretty good, a move that the country's liberal leadership said was aimed at curbing soaring housing prices. Canada gets it. That is what I would like to see implemented here. Again, if you live in a different country and you have no intention of actually living here or living in the house that you have purchased, you don't get to purchase the house. Sorry, we need housing. Now, foreign buyers purchased $59 billion worth of US existing homes from April of 2021 through March of 2022, an 8.5 increase from the previous 12-month period. China and Canada remain first and second in US residential sales dollar volume at $6.1 billion and $5.5 billion respectively, continuing a trend going back to 2013. India, Mexico, and Brazil also top they rounded out the top 5. So it's not just China, it's not just Canada, there are other countries involved. I'm not trying to single out any particular country. Again, for me, it's about making sure that we save our housing for people who actually need that housing because they need to live in it, they need shelter. Finally, couple that with the other issue that we're seeing in the housing market, and it's a growing issue. It's the institutional investors, the private equity firms that have now started snatching up single family homes in various big cities across the country. Now, they'll argue, no, it's just, I mean, if you look at the percentage of home sales that go to institutional investors, it's a small amount. But if you take a look at places like Atlanta, right, it's really concentrated in certain parts of the country, they consist of most of the home sales. So why don't we take a look at this next video to see what kind of impact the investment in real estate is already having.
3% of all homes purchased in the US were bought by investors, often Wall Street-backed companies with multi-billion-dollar funds. The Colliers currently rent in a town near Fishers from one of the nation's biggest house rental companies. Their rent recently raised 8%.
Good to see you. Come on in.
4 times in recent weeks, they've been outbid by investors with all cash offers.
It can be, discouraging when you get overbid by, companies.
How do you save when you're spending $2,200 a month just to rent?
So these companies have you on both ends.
Yeah, it's definitely a conundrum.
In some Fishers neighborhoods, investors own more than half of the homes, according to realtor Laura Turner.
This is one of the neighborhoods that investors have really targeted. They're coming in, they're buying it at cash, and then they're going to hold them as rentals.
They're going to hold them as rentals because their next big business move is to become corporate landlords. And with the limited supply of housing for you to be able to purchase, obviously the cost of that becomes more and more unaffordable, astronomical. So you have no choice but to rent. And when institutional investors and private equity firms are the ones who hold the majority of rentals, you're really at their mercy. That needs to be banned too. So we have 2 major issues: foreign investment in US real estate, institutional investment in US real estate. No conversation in Congress about curbing that whatsoever. And the people who suffer the consequences for that are people like you and me. Yes, we need to build more housing, no question about that. But we also need to deal with some of the lack of regulation that would allow for institutional investors to swoop right in and purchase that new housing because they've got a leg up. They have the resources to do it. You can't compete with an institutional investor that can make an all cash offer. So if we build the new housing, but we don't deal with the regulations necessary to curb that behavior, who's to say that they're not going to purchase all the new housing that's built or the majority of new housing that's built? A lot of issues at play here, a lot of things to think about. I know that there's just this ideology of, no, just build more housing, just do it, just do it. No. Yes, we do need to do that. But there are other issues that we have to make sure that we deal with to make sure that the people who get to take advantage of that new housing are ordinary Americans who need it, not institutional investors and not foreign nationals looking to launder their money. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we've got some more news, including how corporations want to prevent you from getting paid higher at a different company, how they want to control you and prevent competition. That and more coming right up.
Ice cream.
Lots of comments, guys. I love it. All right, let's start with Thriskilio. Sorry if I mispronounced that, which I'm sure I did. Have less than 2 months before I'm out of my place of 7 years because the owner, international, meaning it's a foreign investor who bought the property, wants to sell it for profit. I've paid more in rent than he bought it for. Also, rent money is crazy in, I'm guessing, Southwest Florida. Yeah, anyway, yeah, I mean, look, one of the other things that you should be concerned about is Wells Fargo recently announced that they're no longer, well, they're scaling back their mortgage lending. It's a huge part of their business, had been a huge part of their business. Now they're scaling it back. And some people are like, oh, maybe they just don't want to do predatory stuff anymore. No, you guys don't get it. Less options for people who want to get qualified for a mortgage, obviously, and what they want to do as housing prices decline because of increased interest rates, they want to swoop in and buy up those houses on their own, right? I mean, they see what private equity firms are doing. That's what this is about. And what drives me nuts is how the media, not to sound like jank, but I got something very specific to note here. How the media will constantly tell you, millennials don't want to buy houses. Millennials actually love renting. They feel like they're more free when they rent and they own nothing. You're gonna own nothing and be ecstatic about it. No, owning property is literally the only way of building wealth in this country for the middle class at this point, for the working class. That is becoming less and less possible as a result of these these housing shortages and stuff, but that's the reality of the situation. Okay, I'm going on and on. Let's go to Parker. Shout out to the whole TYT crew and producers for putting in the extra work to cover the State of the Union. USA, USA, USA.
USA, USA, USA.
It was a good time. It was a good time. I gotta say, I was kind of dreading it because the night before I had the worst insomnia and I didn't get any sleep. But once we're on air, it's go time. All right, Joanna Morton says, this is what happens when labor unions spend their strike funds to try to buy politicians. Unions neutered themselves spending billions on failed races. Well, I mean, I would look at the Taft-Hartley Act, which really was the beginning phase of dismantling unions. I think the institutional obstacles in place had more of an impact than anything else. But you do bring up an interesting point. Stinky Feet says, the last people on earth I would trust with my kids' safety is the corrupt government or some greedy corporation. Zero chance of that happening. Yep. And Cassandra Hefton says, who doesn't love the Anna Power Hour? I'm sure there are people who don't like it as much. It's okay. And Yoda4 says, I love your hair. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, let's get back to the show.
Hey, yeah, beautiful hair.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Let's get right to our next story.
Freedom. Freedom to dream, to create, to grow, and pursue. We are a nation where competition and collaboration coexist. A nation whose rich tapestry of people and ideas create innovation and opportunity.
Oh, the US Chamber of Commerce. The US Chamber of Commerce loves competition, guys. Competition means freedom. Except they don't really, because when the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, announced a new rule banning so-called non-compete agreements, oh man, they got their lobbyists ready to fight back. Because fact of the matter is, if you happen to be a worker who sees a better paying job opportunity, and you want to maybe leave your job or use that new job opportunity as leverage to get a pay raise, well, that non-compete agreement that the company had you sign, that'll squash your efforts immediately, which is why the FTC made an excellent move in wanting to ban non-compete agreements, okay? Fact of the matter is, companies are not fans of competition at all. No, they love monopolies. They want to control the market. And more importantly, they want to prevent you from asking for more money. So what's going on here? Well, let's give you the details. On January 5th of this year, in a move that I loved, the Federal Trade Commission announced a ban on non-compete agreements. Now, if you're unfamiliar with non-compete agreements, they can take many shapes and sizes, but generally they forbid employees from quitting to work for a competitor or even starting a competing business, right? So the FTC estimates that 1 in 5 Americans, that is a huge number, about 20% of Americans have basically been pressured to sign these non-compete agreements. And that's not good because according to the Washington Post editorial board, yes, the Washington Post editorial board, non-compete agreements depress wages, hamper people's ability to change jobs, and have a chilling effect on entrepreneurship. Okay, so corporations are now scrambling to extend the 90-day period of public comment on the FTC's proposed ban. Okay, so it hasn't gone into effect yet. The way things work is there needs to be a certain amount of time for the public to comment on the proposal before the proposal goes into effect. The Chamber of Commerce-led industry coalition includes the American Hospital Association, the American Bankers Association, National Restaurant Association, and dozens of other employer-led groups that represent the very largest corporations in America. And they're the ones who are fighting back and hoping to extend that 90-day comment period so they can eventually squash this FTC rule banning non-compete agreements. Now, opposition even extends to the media. The National Newspaper Association, which represents community newspapers across America, signed on to the chamber letter sent earlier this week. News outlets, like virtually every other industry, have increasingly adopted non-compete clauses in employment contracts, not only for top editors and executives, but also for low-level journalists and other employees. Actually, I think none of that should be surprising to you guys, especially when it comes to, excuse me, various hosts. Especially when it comes to various hosts, like if you see an on-air person delivering the news, even reading a teleprompter, very likely that they had to sign some sort of exclusivity clause in their agreement, in their contract. And that's because the platform or the channel that they're on doesn't want you to appear on any other place, right? On any competitor show. I think that's incredibly stupid and short-sighted because it's a great way to get the word out there about your show or whatever you're working on by going on other shows, but executives, what are you gonna do? Anyway, but let's move on. What else? So this is not a new effort. Corporations have been lobbying in favor of non-compete laws for quite some time now. So Ken Klippenstein wrote about this in The Intercept. The HR Policy Association, which represents major employers including McDonald's Corporation, Johnson & Johnson, and Johnson & Johnson, has closely tracked the reform effort around non-compete clauses. The National Association of Manufacturers, which represents Toyota, ExxonMobil, BNSF, and other large employers, reported lobbying the FTC and other federal agencies over non-compete issues. Now, even if the FTC's ban on non-competes does pass, big business is apparently not worried, and that should make you worried. Because look, another really good example of how these non-compete agreements have been utilized to essentially hurt labor and the ability to earn higher wages is if you're working at, let's say, a fast food restaurant. There have been instances of those employees signing non-compete agreements that prevent them from working at a different store within the same fast food umbrella. So a McDonald's worker wouldn't be able to leave and work at another McDonald's that offered him or her more money. That's how insane it is. Okay, so the chamber, by the way, has threatened a lawsuit to block the FTC rule. There's no need to panic. Jackson Lewis, one of the most aggressively anti-union law firms in the country, which advises businesses, wrote in a special report on January 10th, quote, "It is still early in the process. If the final rule is issued, there will be significant and substantial legal challenges to it." And this is how the game is played. anytime there's even a little bit of a win for ordinary Americans, for American workers, well, the business community gets all their resources together and they fight it tooth and nail, likely to the point where it makes it to the Supreme Court. And who serves on the Supreme Court? How many Federalist Society judges, conservative judges, pro-business, pro-corporate judges now serve on the Supreme Court? Yeah, that's why they're not worried. So while I talk about the need for organizing labor in order to have an effective outside pressure campaign toward congressional lawmakers, it's still really, really important to vote. And yeah, voting for the lesser of two evils is still important because if the more evil individual gets voted, well, that person gets to nominate all sorts of nefarious figures for the Supreme Court. And that's what happened with Trump. He nominated and succeeded in confirming 3 pro-corporate right-wing judges. And we have to suffer the consequences of that for decades to come. All right, well, we're going to, let's do it. We're gonna cut into the second hour a little bit, but I think this hospital pricing story is important, so let's do it. A damning new report revealed that only 25% of hospitals in the United States are complying with pricing transparency laws. Now, these pricing transparency laws were the big idea of Donald Trump. It was something that he talked about quite a bit during his presidency. On July 1st of 2022, a federal rule went into effect requiring health plans to disclose the negotiated prices they pay physicians and facilities for each item and service they provide. But prior to that, a year before that, hospitals, based on this new rule, had to clearly post how much they charge for the various services and screenings that they offer. Well, it turns out, according to this report, they're just not really complying with it. And part of the reason why is because there's really no harsh enforcement mechanism here, okay? So the analysis was published by the Patient Rights Advocate on Monday, and they surveyed the websites of 2,000 large hospitals across the United States to determine whether or not they were compliant with these federal hospital transparency rules, which again were implemented at the start of 2021. Now, the law requires hospitals to post their negotiated prices online in an accessible and searchable format. They're also required to prominently, publicly, and in plain language display their prices for 300 of the most commonly used services. So these are the terms, this is what the law says. And the goal, of course, was to prevent consumers from the incredibly frustrating surprise billing situation that we all deal with at some point. And also it was meant to disclose rates for medical services that also allows consumers to shop around. Because that's how you make decisions about your health, right? You shop around for the best price. I mean, look, transparency is good, but my biggest issue with this was it was Trump's attempt to put a little tiny baby Band-Aid, on a gushing wound. And that gushing wound is a broken healthcare system that needs to be entirely reformed to a single payer system, which of course Trump was not in favor of. But nonetheless, here's what the report said. The report said that about 75% were not compliant with the new rule. And even though the majority posted files with wide-scale non-compliance, the wide-scale non-compliance was due to most hospital files being incomplete, illegible, or not having prices clearly associated with both payer and plan. The other issue is, look, we all know this. The hospital is gonna charge patients different prices, different rates based on whether they're insured. If they're uninsured, it's likely that they will be charged a lesser amount. If the person is insured, they try to overcharge to essentially start the negotiating process. They go back and forth and eventually agree on a price. This system is so screwed up. So it's a lot more complicated than this is what the hospital charges. Because the fact of the matter is they charge different prices for different patients, depending on what their insurance situation is. Now, the report also found that 6% of hospitals had not posted any standard charges, data, and therefore were in total noncompliance. Additionally, none of the hospitals from the country's largest hospital system, HCA Healthcare as it's known, were in compliance. And this has real impacts on Americans, of course. The noncompliance obstructs the ability of patients, employer and union purchasers, and technology developers to comparatively analyze prices, make informed decisions, and have evidence to remedy errors, overcharges, and fraud. Like, the most positive thing that comes out of this is that if they're complying, you're able to at least know what to expect to some extent. And not having to worry about the surprise billing is a big deal, right? That's a big positive. But the reason why these facilities, these hospitals don't comply is because they're not really worried about consequences, okay? All they would deal with is some monetary penalties, okay? So hospitals with 30 or fewer beds are subject to a fine of at least $300 per day for non-compliance. Hospitals with more than 30 beds face a penalty of $10 per bed per day with a maximum daily dollar amount of $5,500. This methodology means that some hospitals could face a fine of over $2 million for a full calendar year of noncompliance. Obviously, they're not concerned about those fines because they're not complying. So you got to take into account what their profits are relative to what their fines would be if they refuse to comply. And as of June of 2022, CMS had issued 352 warning notices and 157 corrective action plan requests to hospitals. CMS has also fined 2 hospitals in Georgia. The fines amounted to only 0.04% of the hospital's net patient revenue. So not only was this a tiny little Band-Aid by the Trump administration in response to a severely broken healthcare system, it also really does nothing at the end of the day because the hospitals aren't really concerned about the ridiculously weak enforcement mechanism. So that Band-Aid got even smaller, okay? So with that said, I turn to this video, which gives us a little more information about the flaws baked into this price transparency idea.
What they've proposed is mostly elective procedures. I suppose cancer surgery in theory could be elective, but it's going to be guided by your doctor. The goal, I think, here is to make sure that you don't wind up with a surprise. You know how much it's going to cost you.
And I think your example is a really good one because most of medical care is not elective procedures. And you would not choose a hospital for cancer surgery based upon price. You would choose on quality of the surgery that might be divorced from price. I looked just ahead of our talk, and HCA stock, just to pick one, was up today ahead with the knowledge of this announcement. That tells you not very afraid. And one reason they're not very afraid is the penalty for not revealing the information, $300 a day.
Yeah. In
the whole hospital industry, it's a few $100 million. That's in an industry that makes $1.3 trillion. You know, ignoring this executive order is not going to be very painful for most hospitals.
The weakness of Trump's executive order was not the bug, it was the feature. It allowed for him to appear as though he was fighting on behalf of his voters, ensuring that he was doing something in response to a broken healthcare system, when in reality, for anyone who did their due diligence and scratched beneath the surface, you can see that it was all a pathetic game all along that really did nothing for Americans who desperately need a better healthcare system. Finally, here's a table showing you where we are with compliance on this, okay? So as of February of 2023, the percent of hospitals who were compliant, only 24.5%. That's where we're at. And again, that is by design. All right, John Iadarola joins me for the second hour of the show. We will begin with Ron DeSantis responding to Donald Trump's accusations that DeSantis is a groomer. That and more coming right up.
Can't let that happen.
The rest of the news media says you should not fight for positive change. If you do, you're not really a reporter or a journalist, because reporters and journalists don't care what happens. I don't agree. That's not written anywhere. That's not a law. It's just a rule that they invented so that reporters didn't actually challenge the people that are in power. Well, we don't agree with that. We think we should challenge the people in power, that actually makes you a better journalist, not a worse one. Here at the Young Turks, we do our best to bring you the most essential news stories of the day, but we can't cover everything in a 2-hour show. And for the rest, I recommend Ground News. Founded by a former NASA scientist, Ground News uses a revolutionary system that analyzes where the news is coming from and gives you complete transparency on the potential biases these sources may have. That way, you can read between the lines of media bias and break free from the corporate media agenda. In arming you with the context and transparency, you'll have everything you need to think critically about the news and build responsible media literacy for yourself and others. With Ground News, you're not just mindlessly consuming the media, you're part of a movement that is working to hold them accountable and get straight to the facts. Break through the filter bubbles, the propaganda, and the bias, and subscribe to Ground News today.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
I got pulled in. They told me, hey, listen, Cenk, we're insiders. We are the establishment. People in Washington tell me that they're concerned about your tone. We think that there's a better role for you, and it's not in 6 o'clock. The problem with the mainstream media is they're desperate to get access. They don't challenge the government. They don't challenge power. We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media.
Components that corrupt our politicians, I think, also corrupt mainstream media. It's really difficult for cable outlets to talk about things like income inequality, wealth inequality, when the advertisers that are funding their shows are the same corporations that want to ensure that the same system continues. People watch digital media or new media, they get a completely different message. They focus on the issues that matter or resonate more with the constituency. We need to know one thing. Is the corporate media incompetent?
Corporate media, I can't hear you. Establishment press, where are you? I can't hear you. But the media's position I am clear on. Everything is pro-war, so everything is just framed that way. In this case, I mean, war is inevitable, right? I mean, the defense contractors should get a couple more $1 trillion. You ready for the stunning results? Only 6% of people say they have a great deal of confidence in the press. Wakey, okay? Progressives don't like the media either. You know why? It's the corporate media. Corporate media sounds like a conspiracy. Wait. Who owns you? Multi-billion-dollar corporations, public corporations. You have to do corporate media because corporations own us. Yeah, that's how it works. We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
The joke is not on me, it is on you. You're gonna hate it.
Sure, John Warderola.
USA, USA, USA.
John.
That's me.
I gotta give the people what they want, okay?
More deep dives?
Well, I don't know if the people want that.
I heard requests.
But I do give it to them.
You do.
No, Clifton writes in our super chats and says, okay, Anna, I had to buy a super chat to just make sure you say the corporate F word. Come on, say it for us. It's my fave.
Fiduciary?
You stepped on my lines.
Sorry.
Cenk Uygur
Oh
today.
no, I'll leave. Okay, that was feckless of me.
Fiduciary.
Yeah. Fiduciary
responsibility.
Those are important responsibilities.
No, they're awful responsibilities.
Oh, okay. Well, I knew there was something.
End it. All right. Anyway, well, let's get to some of the news. Of course, John Iadarola, host of the Damage Report, is here.
Hello, everyone.
To help me talk about these very important stories. This is the part of the show where we have fun.
Oh, we're gonna have some fun.
Lots of fun.
Or else.
Let's begin with this.
Would you like me to give the direct quote?
Yeah.
Please excuse my language. This is a direct quote, but Chrissy Teigen referred to Donald Trump as a ass bitch.
Okay. Free speech.
This hearing by Republicans to cry about how they're such victims of social media platforms is not going so well for them. It just isn't. Because it turns out that after all we heard about the Twitter files, all we heard about the Biden campaign trying to censor tweets on Twitter, it turns out, oh wow, Trump, when he was president, meaning government official, executive branch, he tried to get stuff taken down from Twitter that hurt his feelings, including the tweet from Chrissy Teigen. LOL, what a P-word ass bitch. Tagged everyone but me, an honor, Mr. President.
She called him Mr. President, she's being polite.
I mean, very respectful.
Come on.
So apparently that offended him enough to get his team to try to get that tweet taken down.
I mean, look, if you want to take down all the tweets of people calling you a PSB, you're gonna need to hire some more people. That's a jobs creation program I can get behind. Because it's common and it's not restricted to Chrissy Teigen.
So apparently when this happened, it was from 2019. John Legend, Chrissy Teigen's husband, got into some sort of Twitter beef with Trump. And that led to the Chrissy Teigen tweet. Can everyone just stop?
Stop what? Calling him a PSB?
No.
Because I won't.
Guys.
You can't make me.
Can you imagine being that powerful?
To take down a tweet like that?
To care and be like,
Oh, you mean be that powerful and yet so whiny and weak? No, I can't imagine that.
People are gonna say mean things about you, right?
Yeah,
just
I have been and will continue to in this very segment.
Yes.
Take us down, take us down.
So the woman that we heard from is a former Twitter employee, right? So this hearing brought in some Twitter employees, including Anika Navarroles. That is the woman that we heard from. We should hear a little more from her testimony. Let's watch.
According to notes from a conversation with you, Ms. Navarroles' counsel, your counsel, the White House almost immediately thereafter contacted Twitter to demand the tweet be taken down. Is that accurate?
In my role, I was not responsible for receiving any sort of request from the government. However, what I was privy to was my supervisors letting us know that we had received something along those lines or something of a request. In that particular instance, I do remember hearing that we had received a request from the White House to make sure that we evaluated this tweet and that they wanted it to come down because it was a derogatory statement directed towards the president.
They wanted it to come down. They made that request.
To my recollection, yes.
I thought that was an inappropriate action by a government official, let alone the White House. But it wasn't Joe Biden about his son's laptop. It was Donald Trump because he didn't like what Chrissy Teigen had to say about him. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
My.
My. And by the way, I shouldn't minimize what her role was at Twitter. She was a Twitter executive.
Sure.
So again, Republicans brought her on along with other, former employees of Twitter, specifically to make their case that they're such victims of the previously censorious Twitter platform.
Yeah.
But look, it turns out that when it comes to free speech, everyone's full of crap. Everyone, okay? Everyone from every party tries to censor speech in some way when they get offended. It's just, it is what it is. It's the truth.
I've never seen Bernie do it.
Well, that's true, but Bernie's very lovable.
So look, it's obviously hilarious that he wanted to take this down. It is funny, and so on that shallow level, I can enjoy it. But we do have to acknowledge that there are differences. Obviously, these are not the exact same thing. So they came in wanting to focus on Biden doing this. And as you point out, they think that the Biden campaign did some of this, and now it appears Trump did. So you're right, when it comes to a generalized lower F, lower S free speech, there is some similarity there. When it comes to the First Amendment, these are very different things because Joe Biden was a private citizen and he was the sitting president of the United States.
That's
so if there's any there, it's there, what you just saw. It's the actual government doing it. And it's so weird that after months of journalists having access to all these Twitter files, that they didn't come across this. They were, I guess, so busy finding private citizens requesting things get taken down without any of the power of the government behind it or anything like that. And it's weird because not only did you have the very serious journalist, but you had the CEO himself, a man who at his core is just a commitment to free speech and opposition to censorship, giving them access. It's so weird that it took this long to find out about it.
I think this is the most important issue in the country. Sometimes I do feel a little bit of concern about the tens of millions of Americans who don't have health care and often will go bankrupt when they need medical treatment. But I mean, that really pales in comparison to the incredibly critical issue at hand here, which is a platform that really has no impact on your life if you decide not to be on it.
Sure,
Can we just be
in a
adults
general
for a
sense,
second?
yes.
This is all just a massive elite circle jerk. That's all this is, right? Like, I want to make sure I'm not being shadow banned. I mean, I'm not doing anything to legislate or govern this country. I don't care about any of that. But me. Am I being censored? Me. That's all it is, all day long. That's why I'm so bored with my job. That's why I'm bored with my job. Because all day long, everyone's constantly talking about the hurt feelings of the elites in this country. I don't care about your hurt feelings, okay? Twitter is not the most important platform of all time. It's not, I don't find it important at all, okay?
Yeah, I get the general idea. My issue isn't about the fifis of the elites. I really don't care about them. It's that this is actually the government using its power to shut down voices. And sure, the voice that it might be shutting down briefly could be Chrissy Teigen, and maybe we don't care too much about that. That was a funny tweet, she's had her missteps or whatever. But if Trump gets back into office and now he has an even more friendly executive in charge of Twitter, I don't think they're just gonna be coming for the Chrissy Teigens. They're gonna be coming for progressive candidates, people who advocate for a wealth tax, labor organizers, those sorts of things. And again, regular people debating or a company debating these things might be fine. The protection we're supposed to have is against the government mandating this sort of censorship. And that is constantly lost on the people who dominate the conversation about free speech. But we finally have a case in which it is actually the government, and I guarantee they're not gonna have anything to say about this. Glenn Greenwald is not gonna be freaking out about this. Dave Rubin's gonna suddenly have something else to do. So weird that when it's the actual government doing the censorship, they're gonna be real quiet all of a sudden. They're not gonna write any books about that.
Are you saying that Glenn Greenwald is not an honest actor?
I couldn't tell you, I don't watch his stuff. My impression based on what I've heard is that not necessarily. But anyway, I mean the movement at large, the quote unquote free speech warriors who care about criticism and claim that that's censorship, but don't care about censorship.
The government is currently banning books in schools in places like Florida, for instance.
Yeah,
I don't hear a peep from these so-called free speech absolutists who take up all the freaking oxygen in the room with their like faux outrage over nonsense.
Wait, what about the ones who focus explicitly on book banning?
Like which ones?
Like Dave Rubin, he must have a problem with this, right? And he made a whole book about it. He wrote that book.
No, book bans only matter when it impacts him.
Or when he desperately wants it to impact him, when he's desperately begging for people to ban his book and nobody cared.
Right, 100%.
Yeah.
A few other things to note from this hearing. At one point, AOC was able to engage in a line of questioning with Navaroli, and here's what happened. So AOC asked her about the company's response to a 2019 Trump tweet where he called for AOC and 3 other Democratic congresswomen of color to, quote, go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came.
Okay. So New York? Like, where does he think that they came from?
So Navaroli responded to that by saying that her team reviewed the tweet and found that it was in fact a violation of Twitter's policies against abuse of immigrants, which explicitly barred the phrase, go back to where you came from, okay? But guess what happened? Guess what Twitter did? They, instead of, I don't know, taking down Trump's tweet, I guess, they changed the policy to accommodate Trump's tweet. So let me give you that exchange. Navroli said her assessment was overridden, and AOC asked if the policy was changed a day or two later. She responded, yes, that trope, go back to where you came from, was removed from the content moderation guidance as an example. And AOC responded, so Twitter changed their own policy after the president violated it in order to essentially accommodate his tweet. And at that point, Navroli said yes.
That's good. That's good. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, the line of questioning is good. See, that's why I like AOC in these meetings, and people like Raskin and Porter. They ask insightful questions. They've done the research to know what to ask about, and they reveal truth. Whereas Marjorie Greene just barks at a person who has no idea what she's saying because she's spouting off stuff that she read on 4chan. That is not the same thing, actually. And again, like I've generally said for years, if Twitter wants to have or not have the phrase "go back to your country" on the list of banned phrases, that's up to them. They're a private company. The fact that they're removing it directly to protect an elite who has already shown that he's perfectly willing to pressure that company to change their policies, then that's not as good, and potential users of Twitter going forward should bear that in mind.
They should definitely bear that in mind. And I haven't seen any of Marjorie Greene's participation in this hearing, but I have seen what Lauren Boebert wanted to ask about. You wanna know what Lauren Boebert's concerned about? Lauren Boebert. Was I shadow banned? No one cares, Lauren, let's move on. And in fact, we're gonna move on right now.
Oh, okay.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get to the story I've been teasing you with. How did Ron DeSantis respond to Trump's pretty crazy accusations about him on Truth Social? We've got that and more coming right up.
Okay, free speech.
Ice cream. Special thanks to our new YouTube members, including Nikki, Gabby Mathis, Jess, who by the way gifted a TYT membership. Really appreciate that. Garrison McAfee also did, and so did Alex Mauricio Zapata. So thank you so much for becoming members and supporting the show. We wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. We would probably have to rely on corporate sponsors, and I don't like that. I don't want that. Chips Reynolds writes in and says, so wait, Marjorie Taylor Greene dressing like a Chinese spy balloon, doesn't that mean she's revealing herself to be a Chinese spy herself?
My. You gotta clip out that my. That was great.
Can't let that happen. All right, Explore Infinity says, most countries have laws to control foreign investment. I don't understand why it's easier to buy property in the United States than it is to buy property in other countries. Well, the United States is corrupt, incredibly corrupt. We have legalized the corruption.
Yeah, they wanna sell it.
Yeah.
That's why.
Aquarius Dragon says, Republican motto should be, do as I say, not as I do. Totally. Fortnite Pro.
That's the gaming thing.
Yep.
So
do you play Fortnite?
I don't actively right now, but I have quite a bit.
Is Fortnite on a different gaming system than Call of Duty?
Fortnite is on literally every gaming system that has ever existed. Basically.
I learn something new every day.
Gaming
Super exciting.
Calculators.
Nice. Anyway, the comment is, I'm with you, Anna. I don't care. Twitter, boo. Thank you for that. All right, let's go to, let's freaking do some live reads today. How about that?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's go to Spin the Wheel. I'm sure you guys love spinning wheels. Now is a great time to become a member because when you sign up for annual membership, you get to spin the wheel and win up to $100 in prizes.
Check it out at tyt.com/spin. When you join as an annual member, you'll get to spin the wheel to win awesome prizes like the Join the Thunder hoodie.
Ooh, I like that one.
A $100 gift card to Blue Apron, and so much more. Again, just go to tyt.com/spin or scan the QR code to get started. Also, for those of you who tune into the watch list for its old time, and you're like wondering where's JR? What happened to the watch list?
Where is he?
It's now airing at a new time. Weekdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Check that out at tyt.com/live. All right, let's move on to a few more comments. In our tyt.com member comments, we have Jenks left tricep of fury. Pumpkin spice Donnie can dish it out, but can't take it. What a punk ass. I think I can say this, punk ass bitch. Wait.
I'm gonna need you to take down that comment.
So hilarious. All right, and I got another comment, but I'll read it when we come back.
My.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you. I want to read a comment from our members in regard to a story I covered in the first hour about foreign investment in US real estate. Amaze 54321 says, Anna's 100% right about the money laundering. I work in anti-money laundering, and laundering money through real estate is remarkably common. Number one, thank you for the work you do. Number two, thank you for validating what I said. I really appreciate it.
And number three, how do you do that exactly?
Well, you got money to launder?
20, 30 bucks, yeah. Get this in there. I don't want to tell you how I found it. Anyway,
Dude,
your purse. So what's coming up?
All right, well, let's get to this DeSantis story that I've been teasing about the entire show. Let's watch.
I spend my time delivering results for the people of Florida and fighting against Joe Biden. That's how I spend my time. I don't spend my time trying to smear other Republicans.
That was Ron DeSantis' response to Donald Trump accusing him of being a groomer. And I don't know if it's gonna work or if it plays well with the Republican base. What I do know is the MAGA loyalists have spoken, and man, they have already begun just putting out vicious attacks against Ron DeSantis. So just real quick, because I know John wants to talk a little bit about what you see behind Ron DeSantis as he's responding to Trump there. What prompted the response from DeSantis was Trump posting on Truth Social to suggest that DeSantis is a groomer. And that was because DeSantis was a teacher at the age of 23. He was a teacher for literally 1 year. It was between him getting his Yale degree and going to Harvard. Anyway, there were some pictures of him at parties with some of the girls and he's drinking. So that's the picture in question. And Trump says, that's not Ron, is it? He would never do such a thing. And then there were other similar posts. Like he's so greasy.
I just don't want to believe it. Not Ron. He's such a child. Just call him a groomer if you're gonna call him a groomer. Don't like fake reverse psychology him into grooming.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know if he's.
No, it couldn't be.
I don't know if Trump ever thinks about possible legal ramifications for defamation, right? He's just not really, he doesn't really like to think ahead. So I doubt it. I doubt it. I think he's just trying to be cute here.
Good point.
And I'm amused by it. Now, real quick, John, I actually missed what was behind Ron DeSantis. What did you want to mention?
Look, really fast, and the other stuff is far more important. I am fairly certain that's stoves. Yeah. Oh, you know why? Because the guy who just stood there and said, I'm fighting Joe Biden and delivering for Florida, which is why for a solid 3 weeks I haven't stopped talking about the stupid culture war stove thing. And I'm here to deliver tax credits to people who already have electric stoves. Jesus, nobody was buying a gas stove. They already possess gas stoves at above a 90%.
No,
Electric stoves. I apologize.
No.
I'm confusing myself because it's so stupid to follow what their culture war is. They don't use the gas stoves anyway.
No.
And so it is so pointless to spend literally weeks as a governor talking about this thing that has no effect on the actual, even conservatives who live there.
No, it's amazing. So I'm an expert at this or on this because I have family that lives in Florida. No one has a gas stove. They all use electric stoves in Florida. I'm sure there are some gas stoves in Florida, but it's a tiny percentage.
Yeah, I think it's like 8 to 11%. I think it's the lowest in the country.
It's amazing.
It's a highly regional thing. It's nothing political about that region.
These
It's just
Floridians,
what happened.
man, they're missing out.
I know, it's so stupid. But anyway, more importantly, to the groomer stuff or whatever, we were familiar with those photos. That was news like a year and a half ago or something. We have no reason to believe that he did anything inappropriate.
Correct.
Aside from going to the party at all. Why the hell were you there?
But look,
that's really weird.
But for the Republicans who think it's funny or cute or smart to immediately smear your political opponent as a groomer, be careful what you engage in, because pretty soon you're gonna be called a groomer.
How you like them grooming apples? Exactly, yeah, and how would you like, by the way, you think like teachers are all predatory and everything. Well, he wasn't just at a party, he was a teacher at a party. This is exactly what he's been warning about. Was it just projection all along? We'll never know. But the update, of course, is his response.
Yes.
And bearing in mind that the situation is slightly different than 2016 in that Ron DeSantis is more popular amongst the right than the vast majority of Republicans who tried to defeat Donald Trump the first time were. We've seen this response to his attacks before. What he said there is exactly what oh my God, my brain is all over the place. Jeb Bush, I couldn't remember the word Jeb because it's a weird name. Jeb with an exclamation point would have said, or Ted Cruz would have said, or almost any of them would have said. He goes super low, so low that it's conspiratorial and maybe defamation. And your response is, I'm gonna stay focused on my constituents and opposing Joe Biden. And look, I respect that you're trying to keep it above board. You're being responsible. How is that gonna work over the next 9 months?
I don't know. I'm really curious to see it. So as I mentioned earlier, the MAGA loyalists have already begun their attacks. So let me set up that portion of the story so you really fully understand the context here. So recently, Ron DeSantis engaged in some panel. It was an hour-long panel on defamation, and he held that panel on this goofy-looking set. We just got a comment on it. Okay, so it's actually not that bad looking. I'm not gonna lie.
Does the word truth has to be that big?
I mean, that's definitely the goof. That's the goofy part of it, but
yeah, we don't have the word truth.
I gotta say, lighting on point. Lighting on point. I also gotta say, I enjoyed my time debating policy and stuff on Ben Shapiro's show. You gotta improve that lighting.
Was the lighting bad?
Oh, the lighting was awful. Like the worst lighting ever. Like you're not doing yourself any favors, and you're definitely not doing me any favors. So please improve the lighting. But anyway, let's move on. Let's get back to the topic at hand. So during the panel discussion on defamation, he floated that it should be easier for ordinary citizens to sue media outlets for defamation. But of course, he didn't actually propose any specific policy solutions or anything like that. He says, quote, there needs to be an ability for people to defend themselves, not through government regulation or restriction, but through being able to seek private right of action. What does that mean?
Suing them. He wants to open up the libel laws. He's doing what Trump has said for years. He wants to make it easier to sue people that have a plausible defense under the First Amendment.
But the reason why it's so difficult to win a defamation lawsuit is because we have this thing called the First Amendment, right? So
which they love.
Which they claim to love, but to have a loosey-goosey definition of what qualifies as defamation or libel is a really bad idea.
Yeah, I know that my brain has been like all over the place today, so I apologize for that, but you're confusing me because it almost seems like they don't actually mean any of that and it's all opportunistic.
Yeah, 100%.
And when it benefits them to be authoritarians, they're gonna go in that direction. That's what it seems like, but I'm befuddled today.
So during this panel, John, there was a person involved. Dominion Voting Services lawyer Libby Locke was part of the panel. And this is where the MAGA chuds lost it. Oh my God, it's Dominion. No. So here's what they had to say about it. You got Mike Lindell. DeSantis hosting Dominion lawyer Libby Locke. He's showing his true colors. Ali Alexander. DeSantis isn't just trolling Trump. He's now trolling us. I'm sure Ron DeSantis is sitting around thinking about you, Ali. I'm sure. Brings on Dominion Machine's lawyers to complement their defamation cases, which target free speech and election integrity activists with frivolous claims, in front of the word truth, using same font as Truth Social.
I don't know if
they're
that's true.
so petty.
It definitely looked like he was trying to mimic the truth thing. I thought that earlier. So for the first time ever, I've agreed with Alexander on something.
So maybe DeSantis is a little more clever than Jeb Bush was in responding to Trump. Because clearly the trolling worked. I mean, you've got all these people freaking out. Sebastian Gorka, as confused as ever, simply tweeting, "What?"
That could have been about literally anything. He could have just stood up from the toilet, looked down and said, "What?" I don't know what his life is like. Probably that, that's probably what it was. I'm gonna make that specific allegation. Sue me if you want, we'll see if Ron DeSantis helps you. Yeah, no, the whole thing is bad. I don't know if it was trolling, I don't know if it's a response or whatever. I assume that what he was doing with his whole thing about being able to sue the media or whatever was reassuring conservatives that he wants them to have power over the fake media. That's probably entirely what it's about. And they're not gonna think multiple steps ahead. Like for instance, if this whole thing is about being able to defend yourself against defamatory statements, then at some point you start to question, what's the media? Is it someone who has a very large audience, who traffics in media criticism, discussion of the news? Well, at some point, Libs of TikTok is throwing around a lot of accusations of grooming and stuff. Kind of seems like Ron DeSantis wants them to be opened up for lawsuits from third graders that they accused of being groomers with absolutely no evidence. You could have a substantive conversation about this. He's not interested in that. As you point out, he's not actually proposing a specific thing.
Right.
He just wants to give vibes of authoritarianism.
The country runs on vibes, folks.
Well, the right-wing primary certainly does. Now the question is this a sufficient defense when the other side is coming at you with accusations of pedophilia? Is that gonna work? Is that gonna work for March and April and May and June and on and on and on? On the debate stage, what is he going to do when Trump calls him a groomer 10 feet away from him? I haven't seen any strength. I think he literally might cry on the debate stage.
Who, Ron DeSantis?
Yes, and the right-wing base loves strong men, not actual strong men, but their fake cartoon version of a strong man. And DeSantis does not give off that sort of strength. It's one thing for him to be able to attack the left or the LGBTQ community or whatever. In a general election against a Democrat, that makes him look strong. This isn't that. Trump's gonna be doing that too. That advantage is gonna be nullified. He's going to need to stand up against the person attacking him, and he just doesn't seem to have the constitution for it.
But how do you wrestle with a pig, right? Like, how do you compete with that?
Nobody's been able to on the right. That's why nobody's beaten him in a primary.
I mean, look, if Ron DeSantis is serious about slapping down Trump, he's got to hit Trump where it hurts, right? The fact that he inherited $413 million from Papa and then squandered it multiple times.
Or what about nullifying the pedophilia charges? If you wanted to, you could mine Trump's past and find some pretty amazing things that he's said.
Damn, that would be
fighting fire with fire.
Amazing. That would be amazing. Do it, Ronnie. Do it. I support that effort.
I mean, I hate this entire thing.
No, I love it.
But it'll be exciting.
It's the
I don't
best.
like that American politics has descended to routine accusations of pedophilia.
We've been here, okay? This is where we've been.
Get used to it.
No, I hate it. I also hate that,
yes.
right? I hate that there is no debating policy anymore, okay? As soon as corporations captured both parties, everything devolved into garbage. Everything devolved into nonsense that actually at the end of the day really has no impact on your life. That's all we talk about all day long. Never policy solutions
for what's actually impacting Americans every single day. That is what frustrates me beyond belief. But if we're in this climate where people are calling each other groomers, let the infighting in the Republican Party continue.
We'll watch.
At least we're entertained. All right, we need to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the professional victims in the United States. They have now formed a House Judiciary Committee known as the Weaponization Panel.
Fun.
Fun. That and more coming right up.
Can't let that happen.
My.
Ice cream.
Forgotten about the Twitch community. In fact, I'm going to read a bunch of their comments right now, starting with Media Blaze, who resubbed with Prime for 11 months. Thanks, TYT and Anna. You are incredibly valued for your opinions and vision for a better way forward for ordinary citizens. I've just come back from a drag show, and guess what? No children were groomed. Yeah, that's that tends to be the case with these drag shows, but you wouldn't know it if you listened to right-wing scaremongering about it. Miss Scorp AZ says, I'm in Arizona. We should have a rule against foreign nationals having land here for sure. The Saudis have unlimited water pumping rights for their alfalfa farms. Canadians like to buy our houses because they are cheap compared to their real estate. I'm like, no one is protecting ordinary people in this country. That is the lesson that I think we learn every single day by doing these deep dives and learning about these policies. Mike Boy for Mayor says, my mom had a tumor and they made her wait a week to see a doctor while they verified insurance. This does happen, yep. Yeah. So even if you have good insurance, your care still sucks. If we had single payer, all that time and labor is saved.
We're number one.
In failing in ways that we shouldn't fail, considering how much money is generated in this country. Canadian in Hawaii says, oh, this is perfect. My wife's doctor wants her to get a colonoscopy, but somehow nobody at Kaiser can tell us how much it's gonna cost our insurance. It's mind-boggling. It is such a broken system. And the lack of transparency is definitely one of the main features here. Viral 1101 says, I launder my money the old-fashioned way, forgetting to take it out of my jeans. I totally feel you on that. Mo Bougie 74 says, what results? The unaffordable rent, the impossible house insurance, the banning books, those results? Exactly.
Yep.
Someone from Flint says, is Ron doing the when they go low, we go high routine? He is. I don't think it's gonna work out for him, but we'll see. I mean, we get to see it all play out. You guys will see it here first, folks. We'll be covering it.
Come and see.
Dimesh says, Trump also accused Ted Cruz's dad of killing JFK, though. Yep, that was a funny moment, to say the least. By the way, did anyone disprove that?
Not that I've seen.
Think about it.
Yeah, who's Ron DeSantis' dad? Which historic figure did he kill? Can't wait to find out.
Holy Beer Dragon says, shout out to John to bring out the guns in a Bituation Room t-shirt. Dragon Daddy forever.
No problem, Bituation Room, it's a place you can go. It's a Patreon, supports Francesca and her newborn.
I love it. All right, let's go back to our super chats. We've got LJ Wombology who says, I'm here for labor, Anna's righteous deep dives, and for the ice cream. Stay real and take my money. Thank you so much for listening in. All right, one more comment. Jason Ray says, Anna, I think a better idea is limiting the number of homes any one entity can own. Limit to 2, and any more after that would be would have to be no. If you're not gonna live in the house in the middle of a housing crisis, you don't get to buy the house, especially if you live in a different country. Sorry. Let's get back to the show.
And the only prescription is more cowbell.
music. It's the it's the kind of music I like.
That's Bart.
All right. Anyway, I'm gonna read one comment from Melinda because it's very complimentary toward me.
She's honest. You gotta give her that.
Thank you for this comment, Melinda. Much love to you, Anna. Have to say, you can throw punches with the best of them on Twitter. You're a warrior. I admire how you will not compromise or give up on what you believe in. Thank you. I appreciate that. Although I will say my Twitter activity has been minimal for a while now.
Me too.
Yeah,
it's for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and also the other thing is, I am concerned about things like audience capture. I think that could be an influencing factor, and I don't want to be influenced by anything. I want to come to my own conclusions after doing the work, doing the research, and all of that.
Yeah.
Not reading mentions and I get notifications from people I want to hear from, right? So, but it's just made me a lot more confident in the work I do. Like I don't feel that pressure to say things that I don't necessarily agree with.
I like that, and I definitely agree what you've explicitly said and what you're hinting at. I agree with all of that. The only thing for me is, and it compounds the stuff about the studio environment post-pandemic, is it's somewhat isolating. Like I feel more isolated from the rest of the progressive left writ large because I'm on it less, they're on it less. It's not as fun to use. Like that kind of stinks.
Yeah.
Anything that destroys the ability for the opposition force to communicate is going to benefit the status quo, and they've been accomplishing that. I mean, Twitter was literally down today for a good period of time.
Oh no.
Well, some people need that to communicate.
I know, I get it, I understand. Okay, let's go to our next story. Let's talk about the professional victims in Congress.
We have a government that now, I believe, is targeting the very people it is supposed to serve. So we plan on, as a Republican majority, holding them accountable and dealing with what we have seen. And again, what has been exposed from the Twitter files and, of course, what these brave FBI agents who've come to us now as whistleblowers and told us how the Justice Department is operating and how it is not supposed to be functioning in that manner because it is supposed to be equal treatment under the law in this great country.
Republicans don't like that the federal government, under the purview of the Justice Department, can do investigations into their bad behavior. So they have made themselves professional victims. They have created a panel known as the weaponization panel to investigate investigations into Republican activity. And it's rich to hear that from Jim Jordan, who has been accused by student wrestlers at a university that he used to work at of covering up sexual abuse committed by the wrestling coach at that university.
Someone should investigate that.
But I mean, if you do, wouldn't Jim Jordan be a victim?
All his entire life.
It's just,
it would be.
It's so crazy. Okay, so let's get to the nitty gritty. Let's give you the details on what's going on. So apparently Representative Matt Gaetz, a McCarthy holdout and former subject of a Justice Department investigation, has landed a spot on this panel. Okay, this is part of the House Judiciary Committee, and within the committee there's this weaponization panel because they want to allege that the DOJ's investigations are just merely political. It's meant to weaponize investigations. The new subcommittee is officially known as the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. The panel will be authorized to investigate executive branch agencies, particularly intelligence agencies that grant information or gather information on American citizens. Now, the idea for the panel was first put forward by the Center for Renewing America, a right-wing nonprofit group run by several staffers for President Trump. Are you guys starting to connect the dots here? Federal investigations into Donald Trump probably had something to do with this proposal from former Trump staffers. Maybe, allegedly.
Correlation.
Then it was championed by Republican Representatives Chip Roy of Texas and Dan Bishop of North Carolina. But as of today, it does look like Matt Gaetz is actually replacing Chip Roy in this panel. Okay, which again, Matt Gaetz had to deal with a federal investigation into him possibly paying to have sex with a minor
and trafficking them across state lines.
And trafficking them across state lines. Weird how that investigation all of a sudden was dropped. I'm sure his
well-connected father had nothing to do with making sure that that investigation went away. I'm sure. Anyway, I want to give you a chance to weigh in here.
Yeah, look, this is what the next couple of years is going to be about. It's going to be this committee in 6 different forms. There's going to be the Hunter Biden version of this committee. There's going to be the border version of this committee. There's going to be the balloon version of this committee and this version of this committee, which if Matt Gaetz is on it, is probably going to be one of the most annoying. That's all it's going to be. It's going to be the weaponization of Congress to talk about the weaponization of the government. From what they actually just listed there, looking into the gathering of information, that could be perfectly fine. The stuff that they talk about though has nothing to do with the stated goal right there. Like they're talking about the Twitter files and stuff like that. So this is again, oh, they were mean to conservatives. So what's so frustrating about that especially is, presumably he said that before today's hearings. So you could almost give him a pass on not knowing that, oh, the request coming in from actual government officials to Twitter was from the right. The actual serious infringement of the First Amendment was from the right. The issue is that now that he knows that, it will make no difference whatsoever. Like you need to get used to the pattern that we're seeing right now with the Twitter files and a couple days ago with the balloon, which was, oh, this thing happens and it makes the Democrats look bad, so we're gonna freak out and attack them. And then, oh, it turns out that we were doing the same thing. Ignore that. Haha, it was just them. Like Marjorie Greene brought the balloon. Trump had 3 balloons. That was inconvenient to her narrative, so she just forgot about it and went back to, oh, Biden's got balloons. And now they're still gonna be talking about the Twitter files, even though Trump himself was doing it. That will be irrelevant.
Hold on. Oh, I see what you mean. That 3 balloons entered US airspace during.
So they had their narrative that came up, which was inconvenient to it. So they decided that's not fun. I don't care about that anymore. We're just going back to what we believed before, which is just Biden as a balloon. So we're still gonna make fun of the balloon. Same thing for the Twitter files.
They think the allegations of Chinese surveillance balloons during Trump's administration are just made up.
Yeah, well, it's convenient to say that. It allows you to ignore it.
Look, I don't care who the president is. I just want to understand, and I made this point yesterday, I'm gonna make it again. How does the surveillance balloon enter US airspace without getting shot before it happens?
Well, we don't have the, like it's a very big.
We're not what? We
don't have coverage of thousands of miles of border simultaneously.
No, but I'm sure there is some area like close to the coast where you could shoot it down.
Evidently not.
No, evidently yes.
It's 60,000 feet up, it's relatively small. I don't know what its radar cross section is.
I'm not buying it. They shot it down once it was off the coast of South Carolina. So they could have, if they had.
Well, at that point they'd spotted it. But they had to at some point spot it for the first time.
But John, we spend over 800 billion.
Yeah.
Like 800 billion a year on defense. How did they not spot it?
We should have spent 1 billion more and that was a balloon detection system.
My point is we waste so much money on defense.
I think you're probably onto something. I agree, we definitely do if we can't even stop a balloon.
Exactly, that's my point.
But that's not their takeaway. Their takeaway is going to be, we need to spend 500 billion more a year to stop rogue balloons.
I just hate everybody.
I know, I agree. The whole thing is stupid. The next couple of years are gonna be really, really stupid, but it's going to be somewhat counterbalanced by the primaries are probably gonna be pretty fun. That's what we're gonna have.
To my conservative friends who might be watching this, do you guys just let me know, okay? I'm trying to reason with you. Do you not see that this whole thing for Republican lawmakers is me. Like, I'm such a victim. They're not working for you. They don't care about you. All they care about is themselves. I'm being investigated after I did something that was potentially criminal and bad. I don't like that. So I'm gonna create a subcommittee to investigate the investigators. That is what this is. That is what this is.
Well, it's that, but it's also it's a boulder just taking up time, and that like it allows them to pretend to be doing something for a couple years and never deliver anything that would require money to be raised and spent to benefit the American people. They need to fill up that space somehow. They can't literally just go to Cancun for the next 2 years. This allows them to pretend that they're doing something. Their media arm convinces people that this is the best use of their time. And in the meantime, nothing's gonna happen that challenges the 1% of corporations. So it is personal, but it's designed to be in defense of their donors.
They're such professional victims, it's insane. I'm done with this. They're gonna do what they're gonna do. They're gonna waste time and resources with this nonsense
We're all gonna pretend like it's important. We're gonna talk about it on the show, of course, because Congress is doing literally nothing else. And I'm gonna be miserable every day. That's what I'm looking forward to over the next 2 years of my life. As nothing gets done in Congress, literally for the next 2 years, but obviously longer than that. Let's keep it real. Anyway, let's talk about the sick puppy.
He shouldn't be look, he's a sick puppy. He shouldn't be there. I didn't expect that he'd be standing there trying to shake hands with every senator and the president of the United States. Given the fact that he's under ethics investigation, he should be sitting in the back row and staying quiet.
Senator Mitt Romney does not appreciate the existence of freshman congressman, of course, George Santos, a well-known notorious liar. And he had an uncomfortable moment with him right before Joe Biden's State of the Union address. This is the moment that we're talking about. Everyone noticed it. Everyone was wondering what was happening. You can see him getting accosted by Senator Mitt Romney. You can't hear what they're saying, but you can tell that it's combative. And so reporters managed to catch up with Romney later, and he explained why he has such an issue with George Santos. So why don't we watch the rest of that video?
He says that he embellished his record. Look, embellishing is saying you got an A when you get an A-. Lying is saying you graduated from a college you didn't even attend. And he shouldn't be in Congress, and they're going to go through the process and hopefully get him out. But he shouldn't be there. And if he had any shame at all, he wouldn't be there.
Why did you make a point to say that, though? I mean, it was kind of out of your way to.
Well, he was standing right there in the aisle, shaking hands with everybody.
Did he respond to you?
He may have. I didn't hear anything he said.
Punk may have, but I didn't hear anything he said. Look, I, for the most part, have no problem with Mitt Romney accosting George Santos and calling him out for what he is. George Santos, for his part, feels that this was un-Mormon-like behavior coming from Mitt Romney. I know.
And George Santos is in a position to criticize. He is, after all, Mormon.
Right.
Right now.
Hilarious. Now, with that said, I do have a critique for Mitt Romney. Before I get to that critique, I want to give you a chance to jump in.
Yeah, I would just love to get into Mitt Romney's head very briefly and figure out, is he doing the sick puppy thing, which is a good insult, in this particular case because George Santos stole dog cancer funds? Is that why you mentioned it?
Oh, maybe. I didn't think about that.
And is that a worthwhile burn to do, risking that people might remember that wasn't it Mitt Romney that put the dog on the roof of the car or whatever? Wasn't that a big thing during his presidential bid? He had it in the cage or whatever up there.
Thank you for bringing that up. Because when he said sick puppy, I'm like, Romney, this would have been a win, 100% win, if you found a different insult. Because when you say puppy or when you make a reference to canines, the mind wanders to an incident that we learned about when you ran for president in 2012. And that incident had to do with your family dog, Seamus. So in 1983, he and his family were on a trip to Canada. They're on the road. They're gonna travel hundreds of miles to go to this place in Canada, but they wanna take their family dog, Seamus, with them. They put the dog in like a crate, and then they put the crate on top of the car. Okay. That is insane. The trip was over 600 miles long, 12-hour trip. No, get a load of this, okay? I went back and read up about it just to remember all the details.
Yeah.
Their dog Seamus rode in a carrier on the roof of the family's Chevrolet Capri station wagon for the 12-hour trip. Romney had built a windshield, is he not merciful? A windshield for the carrier to make the ride more comfortable for the dog, but apparently it didn't work. Wanna know why? During the 650-mile trip, Seamus got diarrhea. The Romneys were first alerted to the Irish setter's bowel issues when Tag, their child, noticed brown liquid pouring down the back window, followed immediately by him and his younger brothers yelling in disgust. Romney stopped at a gas station to wash the dog, the carrier, and the car. With Seamus back in the carrier, the family continued on their way. Why did you say sick puppy, Romney?
Yeah.
Not good, very bad. Also, You're an awful person for doing that to the dog.
Yeah.
Like awful.
I think it might be Seamus. I just
Whatever.
don't want to insult
I've never,
Scottish audience.
Oh, apologies to the Irish. I've never heard that
I
name
am so
before.
glad that you did that research because I don't know that I was here when that story first came about. I didn't know that he built the windscreen. I thought it was an accident that he put him up there. He intentionally put him up there? That's so much worse than what I already thought.
And after the diarrhea incident, he's like, yeah, I'm gonna put the dog back in the crate.
That is just wild. Don't bring the dog then. Or leave Tag home, I don't know.
One of our producers, I'm not gonna name who it is, just wrote in and said, jokingly, but probably not, death penalty for Romney. Which, by the way, if anyone did that to my dog.
Oh my God. Anyway, other than that, I like his indignation over George Santos. He seems like an old school, old money kind of rich person who sees government service as a thing I'm gonna do, and then I'm also gonna benefit corporations or whatever. So he's exactly the sort of person who'd be most personally offended by a George Santos.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd hate seeing him shaking hands and stuff. I mean, I'd be equally mad at seeing like Marjorie Greene shaking hands and banging the gavel and pretending that she's a congressperson or a human or whatever. But yeah, I can understand his frustration. But I'm never gonna forgive him for what he did to poor Seamus.
No, me either. I can't forget that. Now that he referenced sick puppies, it's like, how could you not think about poor Seamus?
Yeah.
I mean, poor dog. But anyway, there you have it. A story about two people where no one's the winner. Just another day in America.
Two sick puppies.
Two sick puppies. All right, folks, we're gonna have an awesome bonus episode. Do not miss it. We're gonna talk about how the white surveillance balloon is now being utilized as an opportunity to sell people on prep gear. That and more coming up. TYT.com/join. We will see you there.
My.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So